Recording has been initiated. Let us call the meeting then for the roll call.
Directors Sethi,
Here.
Akbari,
Here.
Gunther,
Here.
Huang, here, and Weed.
Here, please join me for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, visible,
indivisible,
with
liberty
justice
and
for all.
justice for all.
Our general manager for comments.
Thank you, President Weed. For housekeeping remarks. Good evening. On behalf of the Alameda County Water District Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome the public's participation in this special meeting of the ACWD Board of Directors. My name is Ed Stevenson, and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public may participate in the special meeting by either using the Zoom application or by telephone. This special meeting is a public hearing focused on the district's transition from at-large elections to zone-based or district-based elections in accordance with the California Voting Rights Act. If you are participating by Zoom, we ask that you mute your microphone unless you're speaking. You may also be placed on mute by the district secretary. The district secretary will unmute participants at the appropriate times when the board is receiving public comment. In Zoom, you'll be able to view the presentation materials as they are presented to the board. At any time, you may submit a question or raise your hand in the Zoom app, and we'll be sure to give you an opportunity at the appropriate time. If you are participating via telephone audio, you may download the presentation slides from the district's website at acwd.org. But please put your phone on mute to ensure the best sound quality for everyone. Zoom allows you to use your dial pad *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise your hand. People participating by telephone will also be given opportunities to address the board and submit their comments. This virtual board meeting will be recorded and will be made available to the public for future viewing. As the final housekeeping note, the board has 2 additional public meetings scheduled for this evening. The next meeting is scheduled to begin at 5:55 p.m. And President Weed, that completes my housekeeping remarks.
Thank you. I also have a script to read, which is on behalf of the Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome the public's participation in this public hearing, which continues the process from an at-large to zone-based elections. As noted, this will be the 3rd of 5 public hearings we'll hold. At this public hearing, the district's demographers will present draft voting district zone maps and potential election sequencing and receive input from the public. The board welcomes the public input into this process. And again, we thank you for your participation. Now, the ground rules for the public hearing. We'll open the public hearing and the ACWD staff will make some brief remarks, followed by a presentation by the district's demographers, who will ultimately prepare the draft voting district maps to share with the board and the public to receive, and the public, which may make public comment. The presentation materials can be viewed online through the Zoom app or can be accessed through the district's website with the agenda and materials for this meeting at www.acwd.org. Upon conclusion of the presentation, the board and the district demographers will receive public comments and input. Upon the conclusion of the public comments and input, the board will request input from staff, general counsel, and the district's demographers as needed to respond to questions or comments that were raised by the public. I will then close the public hearing. There's historically been a 5-minute limit, although I do not see any reason to restrict individuals if they have more time than that, given the limited number of public members that have signed up to now on this appointment. If you wish to speak to the board, we request that you raise your hand in the chat feature on Zoom. And please unmute your phone or computer microphone so that you may be heard. We ask that you state your name and service address when making comments. Providing this information is voluntary, not required. So let me open the public hearing, and staff will provide some brief remarks followed by a presentation of the district demographers. Please.
Thank you, President Weed. Before we begin, I'd just like to provide some additional context for this public hearing. The Board of Directors are currently elected at large in accordance with the district's enabling legislation. The California Voting Rights Act prohibits the use of at-large elections if it impairs the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice or its ability to influence the outcome of an election. Numerous public agencies, including the district, have been contacted by private law firms alleging violations of the California Voting Rights Act in a push to move agencies to district-based or zone-based election systems. While the district does not agree with those allegations, the board has engaged in the process of moving toward a zone-based election system. In accordance with the California Voting Rights Act, the district is conducting a series of 5 public hearings to receive public input throughout this process. 2 public hearings were previously conducted on October 14 and on October 28 to inform the public about the California Voting Rights Act process and receive input on the factors that should be taken into consideration in the process of drafting potential zones. 3 additional public hearings have been scheduled to present the draft maps and the potential election sequencing and receive further public input. This is the first of those 3 additional public hearings. To develop the draft voting zone maps, the district has engaged a demographer who has participated in the prior public hearings and received input and feedback from the public and from the board. And we welcome that feedback. The draft maps to be presented this evening were posted to the district's website for public review on January 4th. And the district published notice of this public hearing on its website, social media, and in the Tri-City Voice on January 4 and the Argus on January 7. As of about 4 o'clock this evening, the district had received 1 written comment, which has been forwarded to the Board of Directors, and staff will read this comment and staff's response to the record at the appropriate time. So at this time, I'd like to introduce the district's demographer, Shelley Lapkoff of Lapkoff Gobelet Demographic Research, who will present and describe the draft maps for input. So Shelley.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And am I able to share my screen? Yes, great. Yes, it's exciting to be here and finally be able to provide some maps to the district because we've been waiting for this for a while now. This is our 3rd public hearing and the first 2 were the pre-map meetings. So today I will give a brief review and some background materials, and I'm going to try and make that brief so that we can spend most of our time talking about the draft maps. And we'll talk a little bit about the trade-offs when drawing plans and the draft plans themselves. I've organized the draft plans in terms of the characteristics that make them different from one another. And so the one set uses major streets to do boundary lines. Another set does neighborhoods to form the boundary lines. And a third uses the Fremont elementary attendance areas as the boundary lines. After I present the draft plans, there can be discussion and questions. And if so desired, we can even do some plan drawing if you like, and if there's time. So in terms of background, as Mr. Stevenson said, the district received a letter from an attorney alleging California Voting Rights Act allegations. And so that has prompted the district to move to by district elections. On August 12th, the board passed a resolution to transition to by district elections. We've had 2 pre-map meetings, and tonight is the first public hearing with maps. Future meetings will be on February 17th and March 10th. Currently, all voters, all ACWD voters elect all board members. In the by-district elections, a director is elected only from those voters living in that election district, and the director must live in that election district. Now, when we draw plans, we have to follow state and federal laws. The current directors will complete their terms of office even if they do not live in the new zone in which they are assigned. However, then they would need to run from the director division in which they live. And these newly created zones will be used until the next census in 2030 is released, and you may need to redistrict at that time. Now, here is a map of your service area. And we've color-coded the cities. Union City at 70,196 persons, Fremont at 230,517 persons, Newark at 47,570. Hayward has some territory in the district, and it has some businesses in the district, but there are no people residing from Hayward in the district. And this is a graphic that indicates the race ethnicity distribution of persons within the district. The size of the pie indicates the size of the population. This is by block, and the color indicates the race ethnicity of the population in that block. The light blue indicates Asians, which are very numerous in the district, but there's also some Hispanic concentrations that are indicated in dark blue here in Union City and Newark as well. There's also some over here, but it's less prominent. Now, there's a total of 348,283 people in the district. There are going to be 5 zones. So 1/5 of the total population is the ideal size for each zone, or 69,657 people. But we have some leeway, and we can, you're allowed a 10% deviation from the ideal district size. And that would be 6,966 persons. That is the difference between the most and least populous zone. So roughly 3,500 plus or minus 3,500 is what we can do when we are designing plans. Now, here's some basic principles that emerged when we were drafting plans. The first, I think everyone knew, Union City can be one election district. It's just about the perfect size for one election district. What you might not have realized until you looked at the maps is that Newark and everything west of Interstate 880 could also be one district. So I know that we wanted to keep the cities together as much as possible. They're considered a major community of interest. So the question is that will come up is what to combine with Newark, which is smaller than a full director division. There was discussion earlier about the square that Director Sethi brought up about taking Newark and going across 880. And it turns out that that's the Cabrillo neighborhood, and that square is possible. However, there's a trade-off, and that it means splitting Ardenwood, which is another major neighborhood in the district. And plans 4 and 5 show the result of using the square for combining with Newark, combining the Cabrillo neighborhood with Newark. Now, on the other side of 880, east of 880, there are going to be 3 Fremont districts. And basically, I started from the south and I moved up as I was drawing districts. And there are many possible boundary lines that we could use. And that is what I've illustrated in the maps that you're going to see in a minute. And not always, but sometimes there are trade-offs between whether we use major roads as a boundary line, whether we use the Fremont neighborhood boundaries as a boundary line, or whether we use the school attendance areas as boundary lines. And I've only talking about Fremont here because the other 2 districts, the other 2 cities were not dividing. So Union City is one full district. We don't have to think about its neighborhoods or its subgroups because we're not going to be dividing them. And similarly with Newark, we have no intention of dividing Newark. So there's no reason to look at the subgroups, but we are, because Fremont is so large, we are dividing Fremont into 3 different election districts. Okay, so that's preamble to this. So let's get into the maps. There are 5 maps. The first 3 maps, plans 1, 2, and 3, use Newark combined with the rest of the territory west of 880. So that's the distinguishing thing about plans 1, 2, and 3. So the only thing that varies in 1, 2, and 3 is where we divide the Fremont neighborhood, the Fremont election districts. In plans 4 and 5, the square is used where we take the Cabrillo neighborhood and merge it with Newark. So here is plan 1. And let me go over this. Here is Union City. The boundaries for election district 1 are the city limits. So that's a very nice boundary. In all the plans I'm showing you, Union City is this one election district. District 2 takes in Newark and everything else that is west of 880, north, or I should say southwest of 880. So these black lines are the boundary lines for the election districts. And the color is, in this case, are the cities. Now, in this plan, District 5, I can start at the bottom. District 3 starts at the bottom of the district, and it uses some major roads. This is Washington Boulevard to Stevenson, Black Owl, and Maury Avenue. So everything south of that would be in District 3. District 4 continues forward, and that boundary line between 4 and 5 is Central Avenue, a little bit of Fremont, Peralta Boulevard, Paseo Padre, and Walnut Avenue, and then 238. So that is District 5, and then this boundary, of course, is the Union City limits. So that's Plan 1. And next, I want to overlay Plan 1 with the Fremont neighborhoods. And you'll see that sometimes they correspond, these boundaries, to the neighborhood boundaries, but sometimes they do not. So here the color shading are the neighborhoods. And starting again with, let me just mention that, of course, there's part of Fremont on this, west of 880. And so Ardenwood and Lakes and Birds neighborhood is west of 880. And as well as Bayside, and there are only 40 people. Oops, sorry. There are only 40 people in this area, by the way. So it's very unpopulated, lightly populated. So here we have in District 3, this boundary is called 28 Palms neighborhood. And then it follows the South Sundale and Sundale neighborhoods. So that is a nice division. And then when it comes down and goes along Washington, it splits the Irvington neighborhood here. It pretty much follows Cameron Hills, and then it splits Mission San Jose neighborhood. And then when we look at the 4-5 boundary, we see that the Centerville neighborhood is divided. The Central Downtown neighborhood is divided, and Cherry Gardino neighborhood is divided. But although there are those divisions, there are many neighborhoods that are being kept intact. Okay, so that's what I have to say about Plan 1. And then we have data tables on Plan 1. It has a 7.3% deviation. As long as it's under 10%, you're fine. This gives the race ethnicity distribution in terms of 5 different measures: total population, 18 plus, citizens of voting age, which we call CVAP, registered voters. We have Spanish surname and Asian surnames for the voter file, and actual voters. So just to look at this, especially the Hispanic distribution, they are not strong enough. They're not going to be strong enough to elect a representative of their choice. Pretty much, I think, however we would construct a plan. But those with the largest Latino areas are districts 1 and 2. The Asian percentages are very high in all of the plans, and these are Asians are also a protected group under the Voting Rights Act and under the California Voting Rights Act as well. So we get down to CVAP, we see that the percentages fall because not all Asians, not all Latinos are citizens, so that those numbers do drop significantly. Okay, so that's what I have to say about Plan 1. Let's go on to Plan 2. Plan 2 has the same Union City election district, the same Newark election district with everything west of 880. And then where it differs now are these 3 Fremont districts. So District 3 is going to follow this Irvington neighborhood, and I'm going to show you the neighborhood map in a minute, but that makes a difference. You go along Grimmer Boulevard and down Raylene to Washington Boulevard. And in District 4, the 4-5 boundary is a little awkward when you look at just the streets with Paseo Padre, Country Drive, Parkside Drive, Civic Center, and then Walnut, and then Gardino, and then Stevenson. And this makes more sense when we look at the neighborhood map in a minute. So let me turn to that. So this is the same plan, and I've just overlaid the neighborhoods, and you can see District 3 now neatly follows the Irvington neighborhood and only splits the Mission San Jose neighborhood. And similarly, District 4 is nicely following here. I couldn't follow this part of central downtown because of block geography. It just wouldn't let me do that. It's awkward blocks here. So I did the best I could to follow that neighborhood. And then we've also, these boundary lines follow these neighborhoods as well. And this is the outer boundary of the district. Okay, so that is Plan 2. And here are the statistics. It's an 8.9% deviation, so it's under the 10% requirement. And the statistics do not change very much because we're not really changing the district election districts that much. We're really just tweaking them at the edges. And plans 1 and 2, districts 1 and 2 are exactly the same in these plans. Here is District 3, where we're using elementary attendance areas in Fremont. So again, districts 1 and 2 are the same. And so it's just a matter of changing districts 3, 4, and 5. And here the boundaries are a bit different. Stevenson Boulevard to Washington Boulevard, and then a little jog over Driscoll to Paseo Padre, and then back to Washington Boulevard. And then the boundary between 4 and 5 goes Raylene to Fremont Boulevard to Eggers, I guess, and Paseo Padre and Walnut Avenue, Gardino, and Stevenson. I believe that is, or actually, I'm not sure what this is here. It's not Stevenson, sorry. Not quite sure what that line is there. We could look at that later if you want. But let's look at the elementary attendance areas now superimposed on this. And now the map makes perhaps more sense. So starting at District 3, we have the Black Owl Elementary District, Hirsch, we're following this, the Mission Valley, and the Mission San Jose District. So it sort of neatly follows these elementary attendance areas. And then the boundary between 4 and 5 also follows the elementary attendance area of Glenmore. And this is split a bit in Parkmont, but then follows the Durham and Gomes attendance areas. And then finally, for this map, I'm also going to show you how it superimposes on the neighborhoods. So in some cases, the neighborhoods match up with the attendance areas, but sometimes they don't. So for example, Irvington neighborhood is split and Mission Valley is split when we use the elementary attendance areas. And then the boundary between 4 and 5 splits the Centerville neighborhood and the central downtown neighborhood, but otherwise follows the neighborhoods. So the upshot of all this is we can tweak these boundaries, but we can't have it all. You know, sometimes we can go through major streets, sometimes we can follow the neighborhoods, or if you wanted, even the elementary attendance areas, but we can't always do everything. So one of your decisions is what is more important? What kind of boundaries do you want between districts 3, 4, and 5? And again, there isn't going to be much change in the data. There's a smaller deviation of 6.6% in this plan. but the race ethnic mixes don't change too much. Okay, now we have a different kind of plan with plans 4 and 5. So we still have the same election district 1, but election district 2 is now Newark and the area south of Newark and west of 880. But we're taking in the Cabrillo neighborhood, which is right here. And that's Dakota, Fremont Boulevard, and Thornton, right here. So that's what we're combining to try and get up the Latino percentage. And we'll see that it increases it a little bit, but not that much. And as a result, we can't take the Cabrillo neighborhood and everything west of 880. It's just too large an area, so something has to go. And so I've taken the area of Paseo Padre. I use that as the dividing line. And so anything north of Paseo Padre is going into District 5 and also crossing the freeway to go into 5. And that was really my only choice, by the way, I should say. There's not enough population here. There are only 40 people here south of Newark. So, and this is relatively unpopulated. So that we really needed to get a fair number of people, and this was really the only way to go on that. Okay, so now starting on the east of 880, let's start with District 3. Here I tried to use major streets whenever possible. So this is Maury Avenue, Blackow, Stevenson, and Washington Boulevard. So that's District 3 boundary, 3-4 boundary. And then the 4-5 boundary goes along Thornton Avenue, down Fremont to Walnut Avenue. And then the 1-5 boundary is, as we said, Union City, and then takes in what we'll see is half of Ardenwood in the other neighborhood up here. So let me show you the neighborhood map for context. So here we are with District 2 taking the Cabrillo neighborhood and half of Ardenwood, as well as the Bayside, Unity and Fremont. And then District 3 takes in the 28 Palms, the South Sundale, splits the Irvington neighborhood because we're using major streets, and then Mission San Jose is split as well. And then the boundary between 4 and 5, let's see. Yeah, of course, this is Thornton here, and then goes down Fremont Boulevard to Walnut. So that's a very straightforward boundary. I thought it was a little awkward that there's kind of a narrowness here between in District 4, just the shape of it, but it's still reasonable, I think. So then just again, District 5 takes in these neighborhoods, and then also because it's given up Cabrillo, it needs to come and get more population. It gets the lakes and birds and half of Ardenwood. Okay, and then here is the population percentages, and we've increased, District 2 increases by 2% Latino, I believe it was. So now it's at 24% total population instead of, I believe it was 22%. So it's true that there's some Latinos over in Cabrillo neighborhood, but it's not very densely populated with Latinos. So it helps a little bit. So the question is whether it's worth dividing Ardenwood or going across 880 to make that change. The population deviation is 6.2% in this plan. Now, the last plan, Plan 5, also uses the same election districts 1 and 2, as we were just talking about with the Cabrillo neighborhood, and but has different neighborhoods, mainly because of this Irvington. We're going to follow the Irvington neighborhood. So let me show you that right now. This is similar to Plan 2 in terms of the neighborhood. So we're using 28 Palms and go up to Irvington, and then only Mission San Jose is split. And then here on District 4, the split between 4 and 5, I did need to split Centerville. And I did need to split some of Central Downtown as well. But you can see District 5 has very intact neighborhoods here, the Cherry Gardino, Parkmont, and so on, and taking half of Ardenwood and Lake Seabirds. And here are the population percentages, 7.5% deviation, not much difference in the race ethnic mix. And then lastly, this is something separate. I just wanted, there was some discussion at the public hearings before that you were interested in high school attendance areas and possibly using the high school attendance areas. And now that you're familiar with the maps, you might have a sense about this, but here are the high school attendance areas in color, and they aren't really, I couldn't figure out a way to really use these adequately. They're very large and they don't lend themselves to really being used. If you like, we can overlay these on the maps if you're interested, but I just thought it would be interesting to show you at least the high school attendance areas. So in terms of next steps, I'm ready and prepared to make any map revisions. After hearing your discussion, if you have specific comments or if you have general comments, I can try and implement those. We'll have 2 more public hearings, so you'll be able to consider other maps if you like, and then you'll be adopting a final map and determining the election sequencing. And for more information, the public can look on the ACWD website. There's a lot of information there, as well as these presentations and the maps, and any questions and comments can be sent to ed.stevenson@acwd.com. And with that, I will stop the presentation and happy to take questions or listen to your discussion.
All right, do we turn this to the board? Does the board have, first of all, does staff have any questions or clarifications requested?
President Weed, I think it would be appropriate to open the
Public comment?
Yeah, the hearing to public comments at this.
All right. Schedule. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the board on this issue? We had 1 member of the public attending. Is their hand up? Yes, we have 2. We have both Kelly A. and Ken Nashimura. So Ken, you were the first to attend the meeting, and then we'll go to Kelly. For Mr. Nashimura, please make your comments.
Thank you, President Weed. Thank you for sharing the draft maps. It's difficult to ascertain whether neighborhoods or major roads are the most important delimiter when defining communities of concern. I am concerned, however, about the square and the fracturing of Ardenwood. Ardenwood is a distinct neighborhood of Fremont, which has long been marginalized by the city of Fremont, splitting the neighborhood to fracture this community of concern. While the exchange of a portion of Ardenwood with Cabrillo will, as in the demographer's words, increase the Latino percentage a little, it also reduces the Asian population by a significant amount. As the demographer pointed out, Asians are also a protected class. Comparing Plan 1 versus Plan 4, for example, making the swap results in a 5 percentage point decrease in Asian CVAP, while increasing the Latino CVAP by only 1 percentage point. In other words, it significantly impacts the voting power of Asians while doing little to improve the voting power of Latinos. I believe this goes against the spirit and intent of the CVRA. Zones 1 and 2 of Plans 1 and 3 are also congruent with the voting districts of Union Sanitary District. Zone 2 of Plans 4 and 5 are not congruent with those of Union Sanitary District. I believe it is in the interest of voters to minimize confusion and maintain congruency of the districts. Finally, looking at the water system, Ardenwood is a community of concern as it is a distinct geological formation. The impact of a disaster is similar across Ardenwood, and splitting that Ardenwood would split that community of concern. Similarly, Ardenwood is in terms of water quality, specifically water hardness, is again a community of concern in the sense that it receives roughly the same water because again, it is a tight-knit community. Therefore, splitting that, I guess, from the perspective of the water district and the kind of water concerns that the community may have, I think are best represented by keeping that district, that community of concern in one voting zone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kelly A. Mr. Brew.
Thank you. Yeah, this is all in all a pretty fair and reasonable process that's going on here. What some other agencies or government organizations will do when they're redistricting, they'll use they'll put in these zigzag lines everywhere, zigzag the boundaries. They'll look like battlements or crenellations. And then every 10 years, they flip-flop them. It looks random, but it's probably not. When some agency or some group or let's say a large corporation gets mad enough at them at the agency to file lawsuits or get very upset, then the boundaries get shifted such that they now the next time around somebody else represents them, and they are able to constantly run from the problems that have been created by their representation of those people in the boundary areas. Also, nothing that's not happening here, I'm not saying you're doing any of this, is astroturfing. We're not getting large groups of people from strange community groups that no one heard of, or community groups that were quiet for 9 years, and all of a sudden they're showing up and screaming about the things that are happening to them, and they want to keep the boundaries the same as they were before, to promote the interests of incumbents. So that's not happening here either. Also, I kind of like the general idea of going and having districts that extend from the lowlands to the highlands. And I'll explain why. If you were to, my first thought was to do it the other way and have, let's say the higher elevations would all be in one district and the lower elevations would all be in another. And that actually maximizes the disparities between socioeconomic groups, because almost always you get the higher elevations will cost you more money to pump water up there. There's a different level of real estate values up there. There's different socioeconomic groups up there. Everything is different, and then you'll get a director or a politician whose interest is to protect the interests of that group, and then another director is protecting the interests of the lowlands people, and we know what kind of people they are. So that might be a bad way to do it, and might produce exacerbate some problems in inequities in society, and also on the subject of redistricting. You know, it seems like the you know, using this like 680 or 880, dividing it up along there might be a good idea. And yeah, looking for boundaries that maybe look smoother or more natural, or that look better in terms of simpler, might be one way to pick from them. I really don't have much opinion between the different maps. They all have little differences, but I'm not astute enough to figure out what they all mean. Yeah, the process here seems to be fairly genuine and authentic, as opposed to the enormous astroturfing and fakeness of some of the other redistricting processes that I've seen. So you know, I'm pretty happy with how things are going so far. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. The question I have for our staff on identification of the speakers for the record, we had a comment here. It's voluntary, but if any of the individuals want to be able, do we have the information if we wish to respond directly and keep these individuals in the loop?
Yes, President Weed, we have what staff needs, and it is voluntary, but we have their screen identification and who they portrayed to be. So that's
so
fine.
they can keep them informed specifically of anything that takes place. All right, thank you. That being said, we then now move back to, I guess, initially for staff to see if they have any comments.
President Weed, you may want to just call one last time for any public comments. There is another member of the public here, and just to
I didn't realize we had a third member of the public. Who is the third member of the public, and is that member the wish to speak?
I'm seeing Nicholas Rissa, who is actually an ACWD employee, but may wish to speak as a member of the public.
Right.
I just want to make sure that if there is a desire to speak, that he's got the opportunity.
This is your opportunity if we do have a third party. There appears to be none. Let us move then, bring it back to the board and to the staff. So we had an earlier staff presentation. We've had the then next, without staff comment or questions for clarification, move it to the board.
Yeah, President Weed, if I might, there was one other public comment that was received by staff prior to the public hearing, and I would like to just read that into the record so that any context there can be considered. In an email received this morning, Zarin Wevin asked, how will the zone-based election, how will implementation of zone-based elections mandate affect director term limits? Staff provided a response to that inquiry. Inquiry and the staff response were provided to the board. Staff's response was that in accordance with state law and the district's enabling legislation, term limits do not apply to board members. So the transition to a zone-based election system would have no impact on term limits. So I just wanted to make sure that that input was considered and included in the record. Beyond that, actually, I'll just take a moment and just confirm with the Assistant District Secretary whether or not there have been any other comments received.
There have been no other comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Sue.
All
Okay,
right.
yeah,
Thank you.
if there are any other board questions or comments, I think now is the appropriate time.
That's not a problem. Again, open it up to the board to see if there's any questions at all that the board has of the presentation. There being none, let's open it up, please. Director Gunther?
No, just saying I was satisfied. Thank you.
All right. If there are no questions of the staff, let us open it up then for comments on the presentation by board members. there any member of the board who wishes to comment on the presentation and the direction the staff is taking in this effort?
President Wee, may
Yes, Dr. Wong.
I? Thank you for preparing all the maps and taking into account all our requests and questions. And thank you for the demographics and of the eligible voters. So thank you, Shelley, for addressing that. I reviewed all the maps in detail, including, percentage of eligible voters in different protected categories. I will say I definitely have preference for maps 1, 2, and 3. Being from Ardenwood tend to speak with one voice. It just doesn't make sense to me to split Ardenwood in two. And Birds and Lakes actually have very similar concerns in terms of water quality, water supply reliability. So my preference definitely is maps 1, 2, and 3, because they do not split Ardenwood and Birds and Lakes. And lastly, AAD has always been the bright line for City of Fremont in terms of you're on this side of the freeway and that side of the freeway. So in terms, I think for our voters, it probably is also a much more obvious line to draw. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I could go next. I would reiterate the comment regarding Ardenwood, although I don't live in Ardenwood. I do live in Union City, and I notice all the maps show us as full. And that's one of the things I really wanted to stress as a resident of Union City. I know they would be, our political move over here would be, that's what they would want. That's what they have with Union Sanitary District. Now, that said, I'm not a big advocate at all of districting. However, we're going this route. We have no choice. Keep Union City whole, keep Newark whole, keep Ardenwood whole. And then we're down to 1, 2, and 3, which all are fairly good maps. I found the elementary school map to be fairly interesting. But for now, I thought they're great maps. The numbers are what they are. And if, certainly living in Union City, I agree with the numbers. Familiar with Newark, I agree with the numbers. And I think it was a nice job. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Akbari, did you have any comments?
Yeah, well, first of all, I really appreciate the presentation. I think similar to the comments that were made by by both the public and by my fellow directors, one of the key things that I'm looking for is to keep neighborhoods together as best we can. My preference right now, though I haven't decided on which map I think would be best for the district, but I think, like was said earlier, maps 1, 2, and 3 are most interesting. I think I'm more inclined on maps 1 and 2 more so than map 3. But again, I'm kind of approaching this with an open mind, but most keen on keeping those neighborhoods together.
Thank you. Dr. Sethi?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you to the demographers for all the work that you've put in. This has been a months-long effort, and I appreciated the results. My preference after I sat down with these maps is, my first choice is map number 3, because I really like the fact that it follows the school district boundaries so closely. And each of those is in itself a neighborhood with very active PTAs across all 3 cities. And so my very first choice is map number 3. Although I suggested the Cabrillo neighborhood as a square attached to Newark, after I've seen the results here, I'm dismissive of maps 4 and 5. And otherwise, I'm very appreciative of the effort here. And I would go with map number 3. I really like that map a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I would also like to thank the demographers for the work they've accomplished and presented to us. It's workable. I would note that, a dozen years, well, 10 years ago, the Ohlone College was looking at doing district elections and did a demographic study. And it was determined at that time that Fremont was so homogeneous, the Fremont Newark area was so homogeneous that it didn't warrant any of the legislative triggers for redistricting. Those triggers have been made even, the bar's been lowered even more, but it's unfortunate because I believe we're better served with all the directors being elected at large. One of the advantages of having the district elections is that the cost of the elections will be less. We have to pay the registrar of voters based on the number of people who are in each district and the number of voters. I believe that following the pattern of Union Sanitary District is a wise one. It causes less confusion. There are those who really look to who their individuals are for representation. There's some that believe that the more individuals you have representing your community, the better off you are with the board, and that's been seen in the Board of Supervisors redistricting, where the Oakland's insisting that they maintain 3 supervisors, giving them a majority vote, they believe. But in any case, it comes down to my preference would be map number 3. I believe it gives a better balance in the numbers, particularly between districts 4 and 5. And it keeps Niles and Niles Crest as more of a unit. Each of those areas attend Washington High School, which really is part of the social fabric of the community, is at the school level, both elementary and high school, as well as the junior highs. So those are my thoughts, and we'll return it to, if there are no other questions or input and no other additional comments from the public based on this, I'll open it one more time for the public if they wish to speak.
Director Weed, this is Director Sethi here, President Weed. I just wanted to add that from early on, I emphasized that we should maintain the integrity of all of Union City as best we could. And I'm glad that the outcomes here on each of the maps is in accordance with that. And also maintain the integrity of Newark as best possible. And so with the public comments that have been made, I actually believe that the combination of everything west of 880, inclusive of all of Ardenwood, along with Newark, is probably the best map. And the other reason I liked and favor map 3 is that if you, it creates the best balance among voters and the diversity of our community. So we don't have very much difference between different by-election districts in terms of population. That's the one with the least variance. And so that was another reason I favored map 3. But most importantly, you know, having grown up in the community, I realized that people, even when we had our recent Fremont City Council elections, people really identify with their PTAs and with their local school attendance areas. And so I think having seen the work of our demographers, I really like that we can talk to people of certain groups that are community groups. And when you're part of a PTA or local attendance area, that's a community of interest. It's very important. So those are my additional comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've spoken through this. None of the members of the public requested to be reintroduced. So, and there's no more comments from the board. Let us then, I believe this meeting is is concluded.
Okay, we will see you at, well, some